Looks like we're on the air and ready to go. So, welcome to the Friday edition of Dad Advice. Good to be back with y'all from Atlanta, Georgia. I had some interesting conversations yesterday, actually. I thought that was some really cool stuff we talked about and have had a wonderful week. I hope you did as well. I'm trying to think if I have any questions I didn't get to yesterday. Well, I guess I should go ahead and put in my information here. So I can access that. Pull that up real quick. In the Reddit chat stream, so people can kind of grab that. So I'll do the little bit of work there. We can kind of go from there. So slow today. Working today. Interesting. It's not loading. Loading the stream. All right. Well, that might be a challenge. That might be a challenge. Never had that happen before where it won't load the stream, so I can't put anything in it. All right. Well, I can't do anything. It is what it is. Let's accept things as they are. That could be today's thing, is working on accepting whatever is in our life and surrendering to life in a way, which doesn't mean don't try to get what you want and don't go after things, but rather use the peaceful warrior stance, which is just to kind of surrender to that which is coming at you. And I found that to be a really good technique. This technique of surrender. So I'll explain a little bit what I've been, and someone mentioned it to me, and there's actually a book that talks about surrender, and I haven't read the book, but someone mentioned it to me, and I realized that surrender was the next step for me beyond removing attachments. So the idea, as I'm taking it for surrender, is that I don't need to constantly fight life. I don't need to constantly fight those things that are happening in my life. I've become less attached, or we said, right, this is a kind of a follow-on from attachment. I've been less attached to certain outcomes, right? So if things don't happen like I want them to happen, I'm surrendering to that and allowing myself to flow with life, as opposed to fight life. So I spend a lot of my time and a lot of my efforts trying to fight the world to get what I want. So to some extent, what I've kind of said is, I don't want all that stuff anymore. What I want is peace. Peace is more important to me than necessarily getting every aspect of what I want like I want it. And that's taken me a long time to get to. It's not something that I think came naturally. Naturally to me was, I want to achieve, I want to do this, I want to make that. But having done that for so long, frankly, I'm wiped out. I'm tired. And so this approach of just kind of sitting back and surrendering to whatever happens, for me, has become something that's a very valuable approach. So with that in mind, I am going to try one more time just to post this stuff in chat. And if it lets me good, it doesn't. Too bad. I will be disappointed, which means I'm a little attached to it, right? But it's not letting me do anything. So interesting. All right. Well, it is what it is. So let's keep going. Problem is, I don't know what I can really talk about without any questions. So, although maybe I can see the questions. I can probably see the questions on my phone here, but it's a lot more difficult. So, yeah, so I was talking about surrender, and I'll just talk more about that for a few minutes, just because I do think it's such a nicer way to live. It's so much more peaceful. It's so much more, it's just easier, right? I mean, I think I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of my life fighting the world, fighting reality, trying to change my reality, to trying to change people, trying to change situations. And that gets tiring to do that all the time, to be planning and to take all that mental effort to create all those things to have the outcome you want. It takes a lot of effort. And so this more passive approach of surrendering to what happens. So I still have a goal, right? I still want certain things. But if I don't get it, I'm less attached to the outcome. It's not the biggest deal. It's okay. I'll go whatever path it then takes me on. So I'll just follow that new path. And that seems to be, I don't know. So that's this week's kind of journey, and has been a journey of value for me. So hopefully that can give you some perspective about surrender. I am curious if I'm even live now, because it's not showing anybody there, which is kind of odd for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this stream, and I'm going to start a new one, and we'll see if that does anything different. So there we go. Let's just do it again. All right. Yeah, and it could just be that, frankly, there's nobody around today, and so that's why nobody was showing up. But it is a little bit odd. So, and anytime something's odd, you can ask yourself, well, hey, what's going on here? In fact, yeah, see, now it's working over there as well. So let me go ahead and post the information, add advice information there, and we'll talk some more. So, well, I guess I can share the idea again, because I do think it's a good idea, and it's the one of surrender. But you know what? I think I'll just post a link to what I was just talking about, what surrender is, and you guys can check that out separately. I'm trying to remember if there are any other questions I had yesterday that I didn't get to. I don't think there were, which makes it's more of a challenge, because that advice, and it is really for me to be speaking to whatever people are asking me about. So if you have something that you'd like me to talk to, please throw it in there, those that are not watching. So what have I learned? I'll tell you something I learned this week. Which was huge for me. So, I always talk about this idea that if somebody else doesn't like us, it's not a reflection of us, it's a reflection of them, right? The idea being that they have different tastes. They don't like us, but it's not a reflection of us, it's a reflection of their tastes, their individual tastes. So what I learned this past week was that it's also true about if someone does like us, right? So there's some aspect of acceptance that I was kind of recognizing in people, that if somebody wanted to be around me, I'd feel accepted. And I realized that's also kind of a false belief, right? That just like I can't say when someone dislikes me that it's about me, so too when they do like me, it's also not really about me. Does that make sense? So the kind of the overall broader perspective is that, everybody's living their life, and we have to honestly look at both. If right, you can't look at it half the time. When they dislike me, this is how I feel. When they like me, right, and this is how I'm going to react. That's not an honest approach, right? That wouldn't be fair, because you got to look at them equally. So this realization that came to me, that when someone's accepting of me, that it's still not about me. Because I think so much of my time and of my life, I've gone around chasing other people's acceptance, right? There's two things I do. One is that I go after people's acceptance, and the other is that I try not to be rejected. So I've always focused on the do not be rejected piece, right? I'm going to do things that don't rock the boat. I'm going to do things that, will make you like me, right? So I'm not rejected. That's effort that I take, and sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it fails. And I take into a large extent this knowledge that when it doesn't work and they don't like me, It's not about me. It's about them. It's about their taste. It's about their personality. And I came to respect that. But I was still seeking the approval of others, and the acknowledgement of others. And so now with this new information, this new awareness, that their acknowledgement, and further, I went with the assumption that if people weren't approving of me, they were actually kind of approving of me, which gave me some type of internal self-confidence, right? And I was constantly getting this approval, thinking that I was getting people's approval. But the reality is that it's not. The approval is not about me, it's about them. So what this allows now for me is that it's a certain freedom to just be me, because there's no more need for approval seeking. There's no more need for, or even acknowledgement that when they are approving of me, that it's about me, because there's a recognition that it's really about them. So that was pretty insightful to me. And I had that insight I think it was last week in therapy, maybe the week before. I don't remember when I was last to my therapist, but hopefully that can maybe something, it's probably something that you haven't heard before, and you can take to heart as you think about some of these things. So I'm here most days 5 Eastern. If you've never seen me before, I do this dad advice thing where I just come on and I answer questions, or if you want to call me, my phone number is there. In fact, you can't really see it, so I'll put it out there again. The phone number being 470-575-0111, and love to chat through some of these exercises that I've been kind of trying to teach, trying to give over, because I think that's actually the best way to learn, is through having that give and take, and then people can see how we're doing it and apply it to themselves. So if you're brave, or you want to take an opportunity to be brave today, right? Every day I encourage everybody, myself included, right, to do something brave, right? What do you not want to do, right? What's the aspect of yourself that you're limiting yourself because you're scared to do it, and then go and do it. So if today it's, hey, you know what, I really don't want to call this dude and talk about this thing on the phone. Well, there's a great opportunity to take a little bit of a risk and, maybe get something out of it positive. Even if I don't give you any good advice, just taking the risk, making the phone call, which is uncomfortable, allows you to live life more. How much of our life do we sit kind of compacted in, scared to act, and not in our own space? So part of that is becoming more confident and realizing more and more that this is our world. That's how we have to approach it, right? Can you go and see that the world that you're living in is you-centric? And I'm not trying to encourage you to be egotistical and not take care of other people. That's not the goal here. But I do think what has to happen is that you have to see yourself as the center of the world before you can see that you're part of the world. And not in an egotistical kind of way, but in a recognition of taking care of yourself, becoming yourself, and becoming fully yourself. And then you can go out in the world and share that, amazing person that you are with the world. But until you've done that, then you're kind of restricted. Does that make sense? So, and that's my goal. I mean, that's my goal in all of this, is for me to find my own personal freedom, where I'm not being swayed by society. I'm not being swayed by what my parents think anymore. I still am swayed by what my parents think. I'm 45 and I'm still swayed. And I bet you when I'm 65, I'll still be swayed. So these are the subtle, right, things, not by my friends, by my, whoever I'm in a relationship with. Can I stand on my own? And that's the question I'd ask you. Can you stand on your own? Okay. Grumpy Ragdoll, good to see you again. And let's see, Mame Big Sadness has a question. Do you have any advice on how to not burn out, not to give up on trying in your life? So probably separate things. So let me speak to both of those separately, okay? So not burning out, I think the key is balance, right? Sometimes I think that I've jumped into things so quickly and so fast that I burn out just as fast. Whereas if I just approach it slower, like even, I was talking to my son the other day, so he's become vegan, and he kind of took it probably more extreme than I would have taken it. And my advice to him was that if you want it to last, right, if you believe that, there's something here that you really believe in and you really want it to last, start more moderate, right? And you can always get more extreme in it. But if you go to extreme, what I find happens is that after a time, you're like, this doesn't work anymore. This doesn't work for me. And you just throw the whole thing away. Whereas if you take it a little bit more moderately, you might make it last a lot longer. So from a burnout perspective, I think that's key, is really being able to not jump absolutely into something. Jump into it 50, 60%, 70%, but throttle it back a little bit. I know you want to get to 100%, right? Because there's something that's really making you push forward. So that's my thought, is just to throttle it back. Now, I actually don't think that's really what you're asking me, because you kind of said how not to give up on trying in your life. So burned out here might mean more that maybe that's what you're defining, that you're defining that, burning out is giving up trying because it's been so hard and you haven't accomplished, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. What do we do when we've been trying so hard and we've taken every step that we can and we still don't succeed? How do we handle that? Because it happens. It happens all the time, right? We've done the work, but we haven't seen the success. And that's a frustrating place to be. So the one thing I would say is I don't think that work is ever wasted. So what might end up happening is you have to pivot a little bit and take what you've accomplished. I'll give you a good example. I'll give you a great example. I had a business deal. This goes back a while. So I had this business deal I was working on. At the time I was in real estate, and I was working on buying a house. It was, back when, the housing market was pretty bad. And it was actually a package of a couple houses. Okay. So I was working on this deal and I knew everything about the deal. And I got to the end of the deal and I was like, you know what? The deal just doesn't make sense for me. The numbers didn't work. And so I had to back out. And I'd put a lot of time into that deal, like a lot. And a couple weeks later, someone approached me with the spreadsheet of houses and said, hey, Josh, are you interested in any of these houses? So there's 4 houses, just for example. And I was like, no, I've already seen the deal. I'm not interested. And then what ended up happening was that the one or two, whenever you have a package of homes, one's really worth something and then one's really not worth something, and there are a couple in the middle. So really the responsible thing for me to have done would have taken that knowledge and purchased the one of the 4 that was the gem. Because I knew what the gem was, but what I didn't realize was they were selling all 4 houses for the same price, right? So I had acquired all this knowledge in the process, which had I been smart, I would have just picked out the one that was, the gem, and I would have made a lot of money on it. But instead, I just kind of said, I'm done with it. So I think in a lot of life, that's what happens. We do something that gives us all this knowledge and all this intuitive understanding of things. And we're so tired of the process, by the time we get to the end, we just throw it all away. As opposed to taking a step back and saying, okay, I've now acquired all of this. What can I do with it to get me to the next level? So that's what I would say, is that what I want you to understand is that all this trying that you've been doing, that's now just like, I'm ready to give up. I want you to understand that there's a lot of value in what you have actually built for yourself. So it's not wasted. It's just going to be, you're going to pivot in some way, and you're going to use that knowledge, you're going to use that wisdom that you've gained in a different way than you expected. right? So you're going to have to kind of detach from certain expectations of where it was taking you, and instead you find it'll take you somewhere else. That's been my experience. But look at it broadly as opposed to, right? And that's in general what I always talk about is if we can all just look at things like not in the moment where we are and not in the situation where we are, but like broadly, how much more effective our life can be. So anyway, yeah, so that would be my thought on your question. So hopefully that's helpful. And one thing, just a couple things to throw out there. I do find that, people that stick around for a little while on this thread usually actually have some really good wisdom. So I definitely encourage people to share their thoughts on people's questions. The more detail that you can give me, the more I can speak to your specifics of the question. And then obviously I've put my number in here if you want to call and talk through something. That's actually really the thing I most encourage, because I think that can be the most effective way to maybe figure out something that's really bothering you and getting to the bottom of things, as opposed to just throw it out there and have me chat, because I'd rather it be collaborative than just me talking. So that number there, 470-575-0111. Okay, so glad to see you again. Good to see you again, Grumpy Ragdoll. Zach Lee asks, if you could be anywhere in the whole world right now, where would you want to be and why? So it's a great question. I can answer it one of two ways. It's actually interesting. I do like a meditation at night. It's actually like a hypnosis kind of thing. And you have to go to a place. And to some extent, I always kind of end up back at home. And I've traveled a lot. I love to travel. That's my thing. That's my hobby. My biggest hobby is travel. And happy to share some interesting travel stories with you. But I love to explore. For me, that gives me a sense of adventure. It gives me a sense of freshness, a sense of newness. I get to learn about the culture of a place. Why are they there? What's their purpose in a way? And get to meet interesting people. So for me, travel is my thing. But so in some ways I could tell you places I'd like to go. But the reality is that I'm also just kind of happy being here at home. So, and I think that's an important thing. It's just we have to appreciate what we have. And I'm so appreciative of the fact, for me personally, that I have a house that's air conditioned, and I got a fridge downstairs with food and laundry machines and dishwashers and all these kind of cool things that we have in the modern world. That for me, as much as I could give you a quick, I can give you some rundowns of places I'd like to go, I'm actually perfectly happy just kind of being here and being in my space. And so, show fridge, yeah. It's like I have a great fridge. So, but if I was going to travel, if I could travel, where would I like to go? Honestly, I haven't been to Asia, so I'd like to go to Asia. I think for me, I only want to go to Asia when I can spend about 4 weeks there. I think between the travel time, the inevitable stomach issues, I want to have, a couple weeks there that are kind of fresh. But Asia is definitely on my list. I spent a lot of time throughout the U.S. In fact, I did, when I first got divorced, I went to a different city in the U.S. every other week or something like that for a weekend. And in fact, I thought about starting actually like a YouTube travel kind of thing. But Asia is kind of where I'd like to go, just because I haven't been anywhere in Asia. I've been throughout Europe and not really Africa, or Asia. But I think Asia would be next for me when I have the opportunity to have a 3 or 4 week trip. Europe you can do for 10 days. In Europe, in a city, you can see a city. For 14 days, you can see a couple cities. But Asia, I feel like you need 3 weeks minimum to maybe for 4 weeks, just for the plane. God, you want to send a plane for 20 hours. So yeah. Saraya, good to see you again. Welcome back. How old are you? I need to know to see if you can be a dad to me advice-wise. So I'm going to tell you how old I am, and then I'm going to tell you that it doesn't matter how old I am. I'm 45. And this is the important thing about advice, is that you can take advice from anybody, because you have to decide, right? I don't want you to take my advice just because I say it and I'm older and I'm wiser or I'm in a position of power. I want you to take my advice because you think it makes sense. That's the goal. I was once walking. I was in either Austin or Seattle. It wasn't Seattle. I think it was Austin. I think it was somewhere in Texas. And I struck up conversation with a lady who was sitting there. I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm getting advice from the trees." And I said, "You're what?" She said, "I'm getting advice from the trees. The trees teach me things." For example, and I'm going to make something up. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I thought it was an interesting perspective. She's like, "Well, I can see that the trees, they just kind of wave with the wind. So for me, that's a lesson that I should just kind of go with the flow." So the point being that we can take lessons from anything, from anyone, if they work for us. And that's the goal. The goal is that, if I can encourage anybody, is to think for yourself. Make up your own mind about things. Don't just listen to people and just take their advice. Get advice from a number of different people and then say to yourself, what sounds right to me? What feels like the right direction to go for me personally? And then follow that. But make sure it's you and you're coming from yourself as opposed to coming from someone else's voice. Okay. Okay, so Grumpy Ragdoll. How can I stop comparing myself to others? My friends say I tend to compare other strengths with my weaknesses. It demoralizes me, but I can't stop it consciously. Fair question. How do you stop comparing yourself? I think we all struggle with comparing ourselves to other people. Society tells us that that's how we know what we're doing. Like, let's understand, why do we do it? Right? And then we can talk about what can we do about it. So why do we compare ourselves to others? Is because society's trained us that this is how we create a pecking order, right? So just like, every animal has a way of kind of establishing hierarchy. Maybe not every animal, but a lot of animals have hierarchy. So the way we do it, I think monkeys kind of do it too, right? Is that we kind of know where we fit. And in order to do that, in order to know where we fit, we have to compare ourselves, right? So I think that's how it happens. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, right? So it's society told us that it has to be that way, and we believe society, and so we do it. But the reality is that, wait a second. So the first thing is that just that awareness. Can you create an awareness that this is something that comparing yourself to others is something that society told you to do, right? That your mother and father did and modeled and you followed, or they told you this is how you do it, right? And society told you that, and everybody's telling you that get in line, brother, because this is where you fit in. So that's what they're all saying. And the question is, are you brave enough? Are you unique enough? Are you your own person enough to say, wait a second, I don't care what society says. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to follow my own path. In my path, that doesn't exist. So that's the first step, is saying, and again, this is just, to me, this doesn't solve the problem, but this is like the first step that if you can understand, it can help start you down the path. But the first step is saying, I'm not going to listen to what society's told me I need to do anymore around where I fit in. That's the first step. So, all right. So what's the next step? I'm making this up kind of as I go. I've never thought of it straight out, but I'll try to build the model a little bit with you. So the other thing I think is what I talk about typically, actually, I think this will be key, the whole person. And I didn't talk about it yet today, so I'll share it today. So what we end up doing is, you probably see a couple of negatives about yourself. And what you're not looking at is the entire picture of who you are, right? And when you look at somebody else, you're probably just looking at all their positives. Sometimes you'll see their negatives, but in general, I think we look at people and we look at what they have, as opposed to seeing them as a whole person, right? So I think we're faulty about ourselves, we're faulty about other people. right? So when you look at me, can you see all my faults, or do you just see all my goodness? And then when you look at yourself, do you see all your faults, or do you see your goodness? And my gut is that overall, if you're like most people, if you're like, I think I am and have been, it's like when I look at myself, I see my negatives. I don't see my positives. When I look at others, I see their positives and not my negatives. So in both cases, it's false because we're not looking at them as whole people. We're not looking at ourselves as a whole person. So as we start to look at ourselves as a whole person, so you don't really compare as much because you're both just people. You're people with strengths and weaknesses, and I'm a person with strengths and weaknesses. So the whole comparison model goes out the door because you can't compare people because we're just people and we're whole people. It's like comparing two dogs. I always like to use dogs because I think it's kind of applicable in a way, right? How are you going to compare a German Shepherd to a poodle? Right? They're just two dogs. They're two different dogs. So if you can look at yourself that way, you can also get away from some of that comparison. That would be I think that's the model I use to a large extent to get away from it. But again, these are things that are pervasive and you'll have to work on your whole life. And I'm certainly working on currently and continuously. They aren't just things you can turn off. It might even be somewhat ingrained in us, not even just like societally, conditionally, but literally that somehow, there's like neural networks that create some of this stuff. So, but yeah, I think that would be the, and like you actually mentioned consciously, you can't stop it consciously. It's about bringing into consciousness and say, oh, I'm comparing myself. That's not right. And you can use, now you have this whole person model. You can say, that's not right. I'm a whole person. In fact, I used to have that on my wall. I'm a whole person. That was it. And that was my mantra and it helped me stop comparing. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Tomorrow I have to wake up in the morning before the sun is up to put insulation in the attic. Do you have any tips or tricks that may help me out? I have never put insulation in the attic. I've actually usually just hired someone to blow insulation. The only thing I know is that you want something over your mouth because I believe it's fiberglass and you don't want to be getting that into your lungs and probably on your hands. So gloves and mask. Masks, I can probably help you find a mask. So, but no, that's all I know. And just in general, I'd probably look on YouTube about it. It's pretty simple typically. So, I just look and see some best practices on YouTube. Make sure you're putting it the right way, right? That, not flipping it upside down and then, staple it down if needed. So, but yeah, I will tell you that I've never done it. So I don't have any really good advice other than I do know about the fiberglass. How do I maximize concentration to be able to learn/work 12 hours a day? And while I'm talking about this, if you guys have some questions, please throw them in. If you want to call, please call me. My number's further up in chat, 470-575-0111. You can go to the front of the list. How do I maximize concentration to be able to learn/work 12 hours a day? That's a lot of learning and working. You really want to be learning and working 12 hours a day? If you have a choice, is that a smart thing for you? I would discourage 12 hours a day of learning and working. I think we need to find balance, and I think 12 hours would not be imbalance. I think 8 hours is a good amount of learning, or good learning, right, working. And that would be my first advice, just really try to, focus on finding some balance. My advice here is to find some balance, and feel free if you have a reason why you need to be doing it, we can talk about it. I generally find, the other thing I will tell you, and this is something I learned a long time ago, I think my dad told me this, is that work takes the amount of time allotted to it. So if you set 12 hours as the amount of time you have to work, you'll get it done in 12 hours. But if you said it's 8 hours, miraculously it'll become 8 hours. And frankly, I find in general, depending on what it is, if you say you got 4 hours, then you just knock it out in 4 hours and you move on. So that's something I've always approached, from effort perspective is, okay, and I noticed this even when I was working. Like I would get, when I worked a day job, I could get done in an hour what most people took 8 hours today to do. Because between the phone call and they just weren't working effectively. But if I just said, hey, I'm going to knock this out, I knocked it out. Now, I think it's a little different if you're maybe coding or something like that, where there's like a certain amount of productivity you can do an hour. But even then, if you try to set a realistic time frame for the work, get it knocked out, and then you can go do something else. In fact, that's one thing I tell people if their job kind of allows and they really want to move to something else, try to say, you know what, I'm going to work my job for 4 hours a day. And it might be 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the later afternoon. And the rest of the time, I'm going to do my own thing. And I've given that advice to a few people who've started businesses doing stuff like that. So, I think that's a good approach. Okay, let's keep going. Hello from Melbourne, Australia. Awesome. Yeah, that'd be cool. I want to go to New Zealand, and then Australia after that. That's kind of my order there. But you guys definitely have the best accents, coolest accents. And kangaroos are kick-ass too. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about Australia. Okay. Potato salad or macaroni salad. I'm on keto. Salad. Thank you. A few days ago, my girlfriend's dog was attacked in my yard, and we ended up having to put it down. Sorry. I understand that stuff happens, but she wants revenge. I haven't been able to calm her down. Any advice? So any advice on calming her down? So I guess she wants revenge against the dog. Yeah, because she's in pain. Because she was in pain. So that's when we want revenge, right? Can you guys kind of get out of the house for a little bit? Just to kind of change the scenery a little bit? She's in pain. I mean, I think the biggest thing you can do is just really listen to her pain. And again, if someone says she wants revenge versus, right, I think it's one thing, right? Sometimes we want to talk about the revenge we want, and and that helps us just kind of deal with some of it. So but that's a little different than if she's actually going to take revenge on someone else's dog or something. So I think that's the first thing you kind of have to recognize is this, like, is she really going to take revenge or she just wants revenge, right? Because we all have the option. We talk about this a lot, right? There's things we think and then there's things we do. And they're absolutely fundamentally different, right? So we can think about whatever we want. That's perfectly healthy. When it moves to action, that's where it becomes unhealthy to immoral to illegal to whatever. So, so that's the first kind of thing I would try to be figuring out is, well, is she really talking about doing something here? Or is she, more in a mental space where, I should go and do this or I should go and do that, right? Then from there, I think it's just about, talking to her about how sad she is about her loss. So, and she might not want to do this, but the reality is that it's kind of a proxy, if that makes sense, right? So that the revenge is a proxy from her not having to process the emotions around the loss of her dog. So if you can find a way to make her kind of deal with the loss, if she's not, like if she's just kind of ignoring the loss, I don't know if that means to go to the grave where the dog was, but just so she can feel the sadness, right? When we're sad, we need to feel our sadness, or else it just gets stuck in us, and it comes out in different ways, like revenge or hate, different ways that these things kind of bubble to the top. So that would be my thoughts, is really just to try to sit with her in sadness, encourage her to be sad. Like, you can't say be sad, but kind of encourage her to feel through her emotions around her loss, which are really the primary emotions right now. And if you can just get away, I think that can also just change the scenery, go camping. If you can find an Airbnb for a couple of days, just to change the scenery a little bit and let her kind of get out of like her space and maybe think about things a little bit differently. So that would be my advice there. Okay. So we got here. Thank you for the compliment. Hi there, I've gone through a tough dilemma. I could use some help. My brother keeps coming in my room and taking all my potato chips. I've got his cat in my room now. Shall I take his leg off or put it underwater for a few minutes? Well, I did read to the end of that. So good for that. Let's see. What else can we talk about? How do we know your dad listed the white shoes? That is a fair question. I got flip-flops. Actually, I'm not wearing any shoes right now, so otherwise I would show you my New Balance. But honestly, I'm here in Atlanta, and I wake up, and it's like 75, and I'm like, I'm not walking. I try to walk. I've been walking since March, like every day. And lately, I'm just like, it's just too hot. It's too hot. All right, let's see what else we got here. I got a scar from being a dad. You can't see it. That's my dad's scar. I don't remember. One of my kids did that to me. My battle wound. Wear it with pride. What advice would you give to someone who's going to be a stepdad? So I think the most important thing about being a stepdad, there's a book I'd recommend called Step Parents, I think. I don't quite remember it. But I think it's called Step Parents or Step Parenting. In fact, if I remember, I'll try to get the book and bring it on my next stream. I never read it, but the premise of it was that you can't just jump in and become a step parent. Personally, unless, and again, I think a lot of this depends on the age of the child. It depends on the sex of the child. It depends, and that's not really true because there's really kind of be a spectrum there, but it definitely depends on the age of the child. And it also depends on the, active dad role, So if the child has another dad, I think all you want to be is a friend. That's really my approach. I don't think, as long as there's a dad who's involved, and which means, you got to take, depending on where your future wife is, kind of with a grain of salt sometimes about what she says about him. But if he looks to be like a good dad, then I think it's important that you even tell the kid, look, I'm not your dad. I just want you to know I'm a grown-up adult that cares about you, and I'm here to be your friend. And that's all you're going to be. You're not going to discipline. I don't think that's your role. I don't think that, it's the mom's role in this case. I think parents have to discipline their kids. And that can't be, I don't believe, kind of assigned to the stepdad. The stepdad can say, hey, look, to put boundaries around the relationship, how they can treat you, how you can treat them. But at the end of the day, it's up to the mom to enforce whatever the punishments are, and because it's her kid. But I do think it's just so important to show that you respect the father. Should tell the kid that you respect the father, right? That's, I think, a good role model there. And but I would definitely recommend reading a book on it, because I do think that in some ways it can mess up your relationship with your wife if you're not careful. So let's see what else we got. And I'm probably going to have to leave a little bit early. I started actually on another stream talking about surrender. And I'm going to post both of these. I post, if you're interested in hearing more, I'm here typically 5 o'clock Eastern Standard, pretty much every day. I post in r/VDad, virtual dad, VDad. So you can kind of subscribe there. If I'm not going to make it, I try to say, hey, I'm not making it today. If you've appreciated some of my thoughts on life, feel free to subscribe there. And, when I do this, I'll go and I post them over there so people can easily find it. There's also a YouTube channel, which I posted earlier. And if you can subscribe there, I need 100 subscribers so I can name it. And then I'll stop asking for that. But I'm just here. I do this kind of daily. I find that hopefully I can help a couple people on the path, and that gives me some meaning to show up and do that for this couple people. And also allows me to think through some things myself that I might not have taken the time to think through, and kind of consolidate my own thoughts on topics. So I appreciate you guys showing up to listen, because it's not easy to just talk to myself sometimes. But I think I'm going to kind of bring things to conclusions for today, for the weekend, which is that we talked earlier about being a whole person. I want to remind you what that means. I want to, you to understand what I mean when I said you're a beautiful person, because I want you to walk away from this podcast today. The 18 of you that are here, I want you to walk away feeling beautiful about yourself. That's my goal. Right? So I want you to view yourself, like we talked about, as a whole person. I want you to see yourself not for the one or two flaws that you tend to focus on, but rather on the hundreds and hundreds of amazing things that you make up who you are. So I want you to see yourself as a whole person. And in that wholeness, I want you to see your beauty. Just like a flower is beautiful and whole, you too are beautiful and whole. And then I want you to take that attitude to change the world in whatever way you want. I don't mean from you have to go change the world, but I want you to make the world in your image. I want you to know that you have that power, and that the only thing holding you back from doing that is yourself. So it's a pleasure to be with you guys again, and I look forward to doing this, I guess, tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern, and have a wonderful weekend if I don't see you. So be well.